Beth, in trying to understand human mentality, human personality, many people say that our unconscious activities, subconscious activities, are dramatically important in making us what we are. As an experimental psychologist, how do you see that?
Well, there are a number of different ways you can think about the unconscious. I mean, is it something that's smart or is it dumb? Is it smart in the sense that there are things in there that are driving us to behave in destructive ways or to do things that we really wouldn't otherwise be doing? A little creature in there that's forcing us into these activities. That would be the kind of smart unconscious. I'm not sure I've seen any evidence for that. There is evidence for what you might want to call it a dumber unconscious, that we are influenced by stimuli that we're not even aware have influenced us. And so in that sense, we are kind of responding automatically based on these either subconscious or unconscious details or aspects of our environment. I'm not sure I've got a really good example to give you, but one that I've often used in a class that I taught, where I'll try the ocean moon. No, let me ask you this. Give me the name of a detergent. First one that comes to mind. Tide. Well, turns out I made you say Tide.
Because you planted ocean.
I said ocean, moon, and that will increase the likelihood people will say Tide. You ask them, why'd you say Tide? Do you use Tide? Well, no. Well, why did you say it? Of course, some people will say Tide anyhow, but many more will if you prime them with these words, and they weren't even aware that that had influenced them. You're smart, you figured it out. But so, yes, I think we can be influenced by things that we're not even aware are influencing us, but I don't see any evidence for a really smart, like a devil in there that's making us do things.
Well, this brings up the whole area of repressed memories and the whole psychoanalytic tradition, starting with Freud and many of his followers, that say that many of our problems are as a result of repressed memory from childhood or sexual abuse or all sorts of things. I know you've dealt with this extensively, but with so much anecdotal evidence, one would think that there is, even if many of repressed memories can't be verified, there must be some that are real.
Well, let me just say about repressed memories, because that does connect to this idea of the unconscious. The theory is that we have these horrible brutalizations that happen to us, that they're too painful for us to, deal with, so that we wall them off, bury them in the unconscious. They're walled off from the rest of mental life, and that somehow you can go in, do some little therapy, and dig out these repressed memories, and that you have to do this with people in order to cure them of their problems. In fact, it turns out there is no credible scientific support for the idea that memory works like that. There is support for the idea that you can have things happen to you, even bad things, unpleasant things, not think about them for a long time and be reminded of them later. But the idea that there is some process, like massive repression, that banishes these experiences into the unconscious, no credible scientific support for this.
So what is the exact difference, though, between having the experience and then forgetting about it for a while and not thinking about it for a while and repressing it? The difference, it seems like a fine line.
Well, it does seem like a fine line, and sometimes it's a little like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. But not thinking about something and being reminded of it, some retrieval cue triggers your memory, that's ordinary forgetting and remembering.
Right.
The repression aficionados who believe in this theory of repression say that something is going on here that's too extreme to be explained by ordinary forgetting and remembering. And there's just no evidence for it.
Let me tell you about a real experience in my life. When I was a preteen away at summer camp, I had a thought at night that scared me so, I thought I would die if I kept it in my mind. And I desperately tried to put it out of my mind. I didn't think I could that night. But by the next day or the next week, I don't remember when, I forgot about it. And it must have been 20 years later that I remembered that I had that experience. And I couldn't remember what it was that so scared me. And I was so frustrated for the longest time that I couldn't remember it because I knew it was something important to my way of thinking. And then through something I heard or something I studied, triggered that thought that related it. And what it was is, what if there were nothing? Not just no stars and people, but literally no nothing, no laws, nothing forever. And that was such a scary thought. And I was so happy that I finally remembered. So what I'm asking you is that was a very scary thing at the time. And so it was traumatic to me at the time. But then I was able to remember it, not voluntarily, but because I heard it from some other thing, and I had a framework that I was looking to try to remember that. So was that a repressed memory? Is it an ordinary memory? How do you define it?
Well, so usually you see people using the term repression to refer to the idea that, say, you're horribly traumatized for 2 years by somebody in the household, and in order to keep the peace and harmony, you just have to repress the fact that it's even happening to you. Sometimes people will say that you could be abused at night, and by the time you wake up in the morning, you've repressed it and you're having a cheerful breakfast over Cheerios. And then it happens again that night, and over and over and over. I mean, that is too extreme to be explained by ordinary forgetting and remembering. But I think the experience of, having a scary thought and deciding I'm not going to think about it, I'm not going to think about this anymore, it's too upsetting to me, and then being reminded of it years and years later can be understood as ordinary forgetting and remembering.
Does the people who talk about repression, is repression in their cases, the psychotherapist, the psychoanalyst, is it always involuntary? Or do the people, when they have a repression, can they do it voluntarily? But the nature of it, from the psychotherapist's point of view, is it always involuntary?
Sometimes people use the term repression to refer to something that happens automatically. Sometimes it's something that you consciously do yourself, although some people want to call that suppression. But sometimes people use those terms interchangeably, repression, suppression. And my position here is, I don't care what you call it. Just show me any proof that you can be raped for years and be completely unaware that this happened to you, and then reliably recover all these memories later. Whatever you want to call it.
So what are the implications for our understanding of our own subconscious thoughts that affect our behaviors?
I do believe that we are influenced by stimuli, things that happen to us, things we hear or see or are exposed to, and we're not even aware of those influences. There's just a whole lot more to be learned about that, and that means there's continuing employment for the scientists who work on those problems.